of the center. So
good to know.
Yeah, so in the news, those of you who came a little bit earlier heard me talking. So we're going to talk about two new viruses. So let's start with the one that I think is not going to be a big issue, or maybe it will be, but remember I told you I'm going to carefully follow the bird flu. This one is my contacts that I can obviously disclose to you in the government say that it is a potentially big threat. Government is up on arms. FDA is CDC, is very up in arms. There are two now official human cases in US, one in a child, one in adult. Both cases are in ICU with the potentially, don't know if the patients will survive, but it's a officially approved transition from bird to the human. So now let's review quickly what is bird flu. It is a pretty close analog to the influenza virus. If you look at those HN categories, it's a different numbers, H5N1, I think, versus flu. Somebody can look this up, is it different? But there's been a concern has been going for the last couple of months. Now, this case is still in only single digits. So is this going to become anything more significant? It's a bit harder to say. Obviously, each case like this is rapidly isolated. Transmission seems to be pretty slow, at least. Otherwise, we would have probably seen this expand very quickly from human to human. So is it going to be a problem? I don't know. I don't actually want to spend a lot of time on this because I think two cases to me is not alarming. I'm not a CDC, but my opinion of CDC. So I think they're going to be wrong on this one, even though they're seemingly panicking. So the other virus, in my opinion, is much more important. Those of you who've been following the news, what's called HMPV or metapneumovirus. So this one is new, human metapneumovirus. It's not actually a new virus. This virus has been in existence for a pretty long time. I'm going to be putting in the chat the name. So this is the name of the virus. It's a human metapneumovirus. Oh, Teresa, thanks so much for the H5N1. That's what I thought it is. That's the bird flu. And you can Google what influenza is. I think it's H3N2 or something like this. But just basically, it's the same H and N letters, just the different numbers. But metapneumovirus, the short for it is HMPV. And so if you're Googling HMPV right now, you will see everywhere this crisis in China. That's a big proportion or rapidly increasing proportion of hospitalizations caused by this virus. Now, the crisis in China seems to be related still mostly to the just general flu. But this looks like their hospitals are completely overwhelmed simply by the sheer number of cases. Why that is the case? Well, it's in the middle of the winter. People are crowded, lots of transmission. It's very interesting to see that the COVID on sort of the background here is dropped dramatically. So COVID cases are now less than 5% in China of all of the flu or all of the respiratory viruses. In contrast, 30% roughly is flu and about 10% HMPV. So HMPV is still a pretty non-significant presence. However, why am I talking about this? Well, because it's the fastest growing one. It seems to be dramatically different from the previously tracked genomics of this virus. So this virus has been around and been known since early 2000s. First articles on this virus started to appear in about 2010, 2011, because it became one of those global viruses that the governments of different larger countries have been tracking. It is an RNA virus, again, kind of similar to COVID, similar to a flu. So it's kind of a similar category of viruses, but yet it is a little bit different. It's probably closest to RSV, and historically thought to be very similar to RSV because it was back in the early 2000s and then 2000 up to say 2000 up to the last couple of years. It's been mostly affecting kids. However, as you've been aware, in the last couple of years, we've been hearing a lot about RSV in adults, particularly in older adults and the immunocompromised patients. And so seemingly HMPV has jumped that as well. And now more patients who are over 65 are getting hospitalized with this virus than kids. So sort of like RSV, right? HMPV does not have a vaccine yet. And there is a discussion of using some antiviral drugs, but nothing has been tested. So at the moment, no treatment, no. So, and then based on all this, I decided to find a specific data looking at mortality. And I found something that's very, very, well, I mean, less than about a 1-year-old study. Let me put that in the chat. So this is this direct link to the study that I'm talking about, and Janet will make sure we get that. If you want to read the full article, it's available at this link, but also you can just download it in PDF format when you get to this website. I'm going to share one specific. So I'm going to put my screen on. Where is this now? Janet, something changed here because I can't. Oh, there we go. All right. You guys tell me if you see my screen now. Can somebody thumbs me? Okay, good. All right. So this is the graph. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So can you all see this? Okay. So there are different things. So the top three right here, 1, 2, and 3. So this kind of a brown, blue, and this orange are the 3 different types of COVIDs. So the top one is the COVID, the first variant, right? So you see that it's a dramatically have higher mortality compared to, I don't know, let's say flu. However, if you now look at this orange, which is an Omicron, you're seeing that the mortality from hospitalizations from the flu and COVID is identical. Sits at about just over 10%. Now, it's very dramatically different. Here we had 25% mortality from the first, I guess they just call them SARS-CoV-2, 1, 2, and 3. So I haven't looked deeply into what specifically they're talking about, but the 3 is obviously the latest one, so the Omicron. So that's a kind of a good news, right? So now, of course, this includes all of the vaccinations. It includes the history. It includes the treatments that are currently available, medication-wise, as well as other things. And so, that's a good news, right? So now, why is the 10%? You should be wondering, oh my God, 10%, such a high risk mortality. Well, these are the patients who end up in the hospital with severe condition, right? So that's only a small proportion. It's thought to be less than 5% of everybody who's over 65 who get hospitalized. In fact, people who are less than 65 in this category, the percent is so small, it's less than 1 in 1,000 who gets hospitalized. And then out of those, you have 10% mortality. So it's pretty low numbers, but nonetheless. Now, the others you can see here, you have 2 types of flu, influenza A and influenza B. Next is RSV. Here's what I want to show you. So remember how we were like, oh, RSV, high mortality. Well, it's it's almost 25 to 30%, not 50%, less than flu. So mortality from RSV is much lower. And then mortality from HMPV and rhinovirus is kind of similar. So it sits somewhere probably around 7 or 8%, pretty low. Now, this is the HMPV from prior years. So we don't know whether this new outbreak in China is going to look different. The prediction, yes, that it will look significantly different because this HMPV seems to be much more aggressive. However, I think this gives us a very good sense of the numbers. So based on this, you can make a decision. So here's what I want to show you. So here's the rhinovirus right in there, right? So the common flu. And there is the RSV. And then the difference between rhinovirus groups right here and RSV is really non-existent. Now, of course, and this is 2 years ago when they started, 3 years ago when they started collecting data when RSV vaccine wasn't even available. Now, will this bring the RSV mortality lower? You be the judge of this. I don't know. but generally we don't vaccinate against the regular rhinoviruses. So I'm not, based on this, I'm not changing my position on not recommending RSV mRNA vaccine until more data comes out, but just specifically more safety data, practical safety data, right? So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have questions about this figure, because I know it's pretty unique and specific before I move it off the screen. In essence, the COVID still remains significantly. COVID and flu basically now seems to be similar in terms of overall mortality and, significant illnesses. So we should still consider getting regular flu vaccine and then regular COVID vaccine for those who are at higher risk. So that's the way I'm reading all this. Okay. So definitely people going to end up in a hospital with RSV, just like people going to end up in a hospital with regular colds and regular flu. There's no question about it. The question is then, what should we be doing about it? And my answer to this is very general. I think it's much more important to strengthen the immune system without the vaccine. I think it's much more important to make sure that you're minimizing risk of exposure. I think it's much more important to check into, make sure that anything immune related you can optimize, you have. And obviously that requires you to some individualization, making sure your vitamin D level is adequate, making sure your vitamin C intake needs are met, making sure that all of the basic nutritional status is good, that your sleep is optimized, et cetera, et cetera. So that is my updates. And I think at this point we can go to Q&A. Other than that, what I do have for today, we could discuss a little bit about more specifics of kind of managing and preventing respiratory illnesses. But that's up to you guys. If you want to hear this, we'll definitely, if there's not enough questions, we can go in there. So the recent new human mutation that was observed shouldn't concern us. Well, I don't know. You remember I started tracking, I told you I will start tracking bird flu because there's been an anticipated jump. There was one case officially documented, I think about 2 months ago, but the person didn't get sick. So there was a jump. I don't know how they actually figured that out. Now we have 2 cases of an adult and a pediatric patient being sick. I think one in Louisiana, I forgot. I think the other one is in Iowa. So now there are official jumps that are occurring. I think there is some concern. How big of a concern? I don't know. Why is CDC up in arms? Well, because the mortality is much higher. The bird flu tends to carry much higher mortality. And also because, again, our immune system is naive to this virus. So if we do end up seeing this being flourished, then we don't have protection. Now, because it's an HN something, they will develop vaccine rapidly. I mean, there's no question about it because the technology for this vaccines is here. It's not going to be, it's quite different with RSV, I believe, and with HMPV. Now, RSV already has a vaccine, so I presume that with HMPV, if it's continuously being circulated, I'm going to start thinking about developing vaccine as well. So should you be worried about bird flu? I guess I would say keep an eye on this and not particularly worry yet. In my opinion, it's much more likely you're going to hear, oh, I mistyped this. It's not NMPV, sorry, it's HMPV. It's much more likely that, in my opinion, we're going to see HMPV all over simply because the virus has been already around for quite a while. It's already, somewhere between 5 to 10% of all the respiratory cases in China. So I would expect that we're going to see the transition to states very quickly within the next couple of weeks. Is it going to cause a major problem? Yet to be seen. I just showed you the mortality data. Looks basically like a common cold, better than flu. So I probably wouldn't expect us to be too worried, but nonetheless, I thought I'd bring this up since we're tracking this. So, okay. And then my some of my sources saying, don't worry about HMPV either. So that's also, I guess, somewhat reassuring. Okay. In addition to usual precaution that we all know, is there anything else we should be doing? No, I don't think so. Again, I'm bringing this up particularly. Oh, no, there is something with the bird flu. So if you have someone really close to the farms or to a farmland and you are potentially interacting with someone or you directly interacting with lots of animals, then I think yes. So I think you should be a bit more careful. Bird flu is very prevalent in the birds, right? So, chickens, included into the birds, and hence I think there is a concern that all of this transitioning is going to occur from chickens. Of course, it would be really sad to see. You've heard what China did at some point with bird flu. They basically killed millions and millions of chickens. I mean, I think that would be a shame if that happens. But I think all in all, keep an eye on this topic. I, of course, will be keeping an eye and periodically updating you. But, in terms of anything additional, no. All right. Okay, any other questions?
I have questions, but I need to. This is Salome. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think I had this HMPV. I think I will talk to you at the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not yet in US, not that we know of. So it would be much more likely that you either had RSV, or RSV is quite present now. So the RSV and flu are roughly about same, I think, in US. And and there's no easy way to separate. RSV is supposed to give you more pulmonary symptoms, so more cough, wheezing, asthma, things like this. However, it's sort of not necessarily all that accurate. So there's a lot of people with flu who will have rapid transition from the flu-like symptoms into the bronchitis-like, and it gets a bit tricky to figure out which one's which. The only real way to separate is to test. Now, we do have tests for all of them now.
Sorry. I had lots of mucus in the nose, and then it got into my throat. I had a lot of coughing. I could not sleep. I don't know when was it, Wednesday night.
So that's not RSV, right? So this is very classic, and it's not HMPV either. So this is the regular cold. So this is the regular rhinovirus. Pretty much when anything starts with a nose, it's almost nearly 100% certain it is not a flu and it's not RSV. The separating issue between flu, you can't really separate RSV and HMPV. It starts with the lungs. You may have some fever. You may have flu-like symptoms with a little bit of a chills and a body aches, but this has to start right off the bat with the lungs. The same with flu. Flu tends to start immediately with the whole body symptoms. It does not start with the sneezing and things like this. If it started out with the nose, it's nearly 100% certain. It's just the rhinovirus, aka URI, aka common cold. So those are and again, about 30 to 40% of patients, rhinovirus will progress into chronic bronchitis for the next couple of weeks, couple of months. Not a big deal, but nonetheless, the reason and I just show you the reason the rhinovirus mortality is also somewhere about 5% in those who's hospitalized. It's a secondary infection. So people don't die from any of these things. What they die from is in the additional complications, whether they turn into a bacterial infection or there is some other secondary, maybe you have another disease that flares. Maybe there's, electrolyte disturbances. Maybe the heart gives out because there's an increased load of work on the cardiovascular system. There are all kinds of possible other problems that could appear.
What percent becomes bronchitis?
I don't know. Upwards in this winter, it feels like upwards of half of everybody.
What percent becomes bronchitis?
I'm saying it's probably up to 50%.
Oh,
So, it's just most people don't worry about it because bronchitis by definition is chronic cough that lasts for more than a couple of weeks. And, if you kind of think about yourself when last time you had a common cold and then you were coughing for a while, you're probably going to think, oh, that's half of all the colds I've had, right? Give or take. So something like this. Now, I don't actually know what exact statistics. I think I said 30 to 50%. I don't exactly know, but it's very, very common. It's more common in the cold months to get that. It's also much more common with things like RSV and than with others. Now, I'm not talking about HMP because we don't have it yet. So by the way, this is why I think it is important to try to, if you get sick enough that you feel like you should be going to a hospital, then it's really essential you figure out what's happening, and that's why the diagnosis should be established. Now, I will tell you, if you're sort of very aggressive and you want to have an answers, you could spend a little bit of money. You can go to CVS and buy one of those kits. They're reasonably accurate. So now there's even a FDA-approved kit that tests for everything in one shot: RSV, flu A, B, and COVID. Now, is it worth $30? You make a decision. I don't think it's going to be covered. It will be covered if you show up in the emergency room, or I think also a lot of urgent care is testing now for all this. It's usually a nasal swab. It looks just the same way you would look at when we were doing COVID tests, except that now they test for all of it at once. Why could it be important to test? Well, there's two reasons. So one, if it's a RSV, let's say, and not, well, if you test negative for all three, then it's none of those. And then if you progress to bronchitis, then it's just your own individual difference, and you're just gonna have to deal with this. Now, if it's RSV and you're progressively getting worse, well, you may want to take an earlier action and end up calling a doctor or maybe even going to emergency room. Why? Because remember, you saw the numbers, right? So the RSV does tend to carry slightly higher risk, similar to the flu and similar to the COVID. So you basically want to make sure if it's one of those three conditions, you'd expect it to be a bit more severe compared to rhinovirus. That's really the main difference. How is HMPV going to fit into this? We'll yet to see. And trust me, I will be keeping an eye on this.
Okay,
there was pneumonia that was going around, right? So there's a lot of walking pneumonia. Now, walking pneumonia and a regular pneumonia is not to be separated. They are bacterial infections. They have to be treated with antibiotics most of the time if you get severely sick enough. So they're to be separated from this. Salome, you had another question, I think.
I didn't finish my symptoms or questions. I wake up with really sweating a lot. Is that pneumonia? Is that bronchitis?
No. Well, it's hard to say. If it started now, look, remember, I just said that even if it started like your common cold, you may have a secondary pneumonia. If I would say that even if you still have sweats, but your cough is getting slowly better or it's not getting worse, and if your breathing is okay, and if you're not tired to walk around and do regular things, I'd probably just wait. And chances are it's just you're going to recover no problem and you won't need any additional treatment. However, if you feel like you're not getting better, then you could have now picked up walking pneumonia or regular pneumonia as a secondary complication. So in that case, you may need to be treated. Usually the process then would go, you would get an x-ray, and an x-ray then will show, if it's regular pneumonia, definitely x-ray shows. If it's a typical pneumonia, x-ray still may show, or it may not show, but usually with the walking pneumonia, symptoms are when you're walking around, you feel quite sick. You feel tired. You can't do your usual activity. The moment, let's say, you're walking, you have to sit down. So those are all very common symptoms for walking pneumonia or even for a regular pneumonia. And again, the typical assessment would be an x-ray and then an action based on an x-ray. If the x-ray looks fine, you feel like, I don't know, maybe I am a little short of breath, but maybe it's because I have been kind of sick for a while. I'm a little deconditioned and my cold sweats are getting better. Then you probably can wait. But if you're not getting better, then definitely you will need antibiotics potentially. And antibiotics are different. There are different antibiotics for different pneumonias. If you have a common pneumonia, which is usually happens a little different, it's an acute infection, it's quick, it definitely categorizes with a lot of cough, potentially breathing issues, and a lot of fever. Usually that would require kind of a more general antibiotics, oral or intravenous. Walking pneumonia is generally treated with things like azithromycin. So again, you would need we will need to discuss a bit more. Now, if you're comfortable talking here, Salome, let me ask you a couple of questions. Otherwise, stay after and we can talk personally. It's up to you.
No problem.
No problem.
No problem. Ask me any questions.
Okay. So you're sleeping through the night?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's good. That's good. And then, so even though you're sweating, are you sweating more than before? Or is it sort of just, and is it every night?
Oh, every night.
Every night. And when did that start?
Oh, after this nose, the drainage in the nose.
No, I know, but when roughly? When did it start?
Okay. I think on Monday, Sunday
Oh,
night.
so about 5 days ago. And when you're walking around, how are you feeling during the day?
I think I'm okay.
All right. So, and you didn't check your temperature at any of these points, did you?
No, but I don't feel like I have a fever.
Okay. So you feel like you don't have a fever. Yeah. So I wouldn't do anything. I think what we should do is keep an eye on this. If you have some immune support at home, take it. Vitamin C, zinc for sure. If you like things like elderberry, take some tea.
Okay.
Definitely all of those things I would suggest. Now, why am I so comfortable? It's probably nothing. Well, first of all, you're not feeling sick, right? So the nighttime sweats, I don't know. The thing is, though, quite often infections will set up a shift in our body temperature regulation. So it's not all that uncommon for this to be, Now, it's also possible you do have something like a mild walking pneumonia, but you're handling this, right? So don't assume that every pneumonia and every walking pneumonia is going to require antibiotics. Some of them will just gonna combat perfectly fine. And it's important in that cases to let the body handle it, not to sort of push through. Why? Well, antibiotics are antibiotics. It's a double-edged sword. You're going to alter your gut microbiome immediately. Best not to do that if you're okay. And I'm making that decision based on the fact that you're not feeling sick. You just have night sweats and you're coughing, and that's, to me, sounds like hopefully still simply complications of the rhinovirus, or AKA common cold.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Feel better?
Yeah, I feel better. I feel more confident.
Good. All right. Okay, good. So anybody else reflecting on this topic? By the way, I kind of went over some of the basic treatments. I'm going to go over a couple more in a second, since sounds like we're just automatically kind of covering. All right, so let me go ahead and mute yourself if you don't. No, I'm going to mute you. Okay. All right, so what are the other treatment things we should be considering, right? Well, first of all, who remembers, see show of hands, what is incentive spirometer? And Salome, listen to this part very carefully. It's important for you. Nobody remembers what incentive spirometer is. Oh my God, you guys. Oh, that's no good. All right, that's one of my favorite treatments when somebody develops cough, when you develop any kind of sort of a post-acute or chronic pulmonary problem. It's in essence an exercise, lung exercise. So I know. When I said that, you guys, oh, of course you know about that. So let me do this. Let me pull up favorite incentives parameter. It used to be just the regular $10 piece that you get in the hospital with those balls going up in the air, and you take a deep breath and it goes. No longer the case. Now I definitely prefer the breather, especially since a couple of years ago there was a large clinical trial showing that breather is a lot better compared to the regular balls in the air kind of exerciser. And the breather is nothing but the fancy incentives parameter. So what I'll do is I'll give you a link to the formal website. And I think FDA on this one agreed. They have approved breather. I don't remember when, but relatively recent. So now it's a officially FDA approved device. And you can get it on Amazon for $50. So it is a little bit more expensive, but again, you're buying it one time. So you're buying it one time and then you're reusing it. Again, let me just get the link to you guys if you want to bother getting it on Amazon. Okay, there we go. I have this nice short link versus that ugly long one. So that's on Amazon. Device actually often used by athletes and by anybody who wants to simply improve the capacity of your lung. Now, how does this work? Whether you use breather or you use the old device, basically, when you're taking deep breaths, you're forcing the lung to expand and you're opening up more airways and you're making the lungs work a bit better. So the muscles of the chest will exercise. And that decreases a couple of things. It decreases chances of minor lung collapse, or what's called atelectasis, where parts of the lung shrink in volume and thus become unavailable for the air exchange. When that happens, you obviously you get less oxygen and you get less CO2 migrating out. That's when people feel a bit more short of breath, right? So anybody who have asthma had this episodes where they would suddenly feel slight shift. That sometimes it happens also quite a lot with any kind of pneumonia or any kind of bronchitis where there's a little bit of lung collapse. It's immediately seen on X-ray, but most of those things are functional, meaning that they'll expand quite quickly, and the incentives parameter seems to help that. And there's a very strong data that incentives parameter shortens hospital stays and definitely helps to even prevent hospital admissions if you use it. So have one at home. If you don't want to spend $50, that's no problem. Just Google incentives parameter, or let me just give you another link to something a lot cheaper. Incentives parameter. The old ones are about $10. The ones that look like, oh my God, prices on these things went up too. Now they're $20. Gee, feels like everything. I went to a store and I wanted to buy remember the olives, the olive bar. And this was like some Maine Honifer, I think it's called, like a local. I used to think that they cost like $6, $7. They're $12 a pound. Everything. So this incentive, I swear to you, I'm not lying. It used to be that they were like $10, $15. Now, like, I'm not seeing anything for $10, $15. They were like $30. Gee. All right. Is there anything for less than $20? Good grief. Oh, here's one for 17. Okay, so that's I'm sure it doesn't matter which one you get. So I'm going to give you a link to this. At least it's a little bit cheap. But anyway, so make sure you have one at home. I mean, I think everybody should have one at home. Even if you're young and healthy, it's one of those things, just like, we all were getting those oxygen meters on the finger. It's the pulse ox meters. So that's another device that I suggest you have in the house, just because they're simpler. Which one to get, it's up to you. I recommend breather simply because there's more data on them. And they're also easier to use, and they're a bit more sophisticated. With the second one that I posted, you got those balls that go up in the air and you're just trying to keep on increasing volume of inhale each time. The breather has dials on it, and so the resistance, you're changing resistance except against the inhalation, and so there seems to be a bit more sophisticated device. All right, let's see if there are questions, because I stopped monitoring the chat for a sec. All right, Terry, we'll see you back. Yeah, we're gonna probably just take another question or two, and we'll do a little bit of a practice.
Mikhail, I had a question about buying eggs from a farmer. I buy duck eggs and chicken eggs from a free range. She doesn't really own the chickens, I think, or the ducks. They come to her property and lay eggs. Should she be worried about bird flu, and should I be worried about those eggs?
So I think it's completely safe to get eggs. I think probability of the eggs being affected by bird flu is negligent. Now, I think I would say if you're buying an eggs from a very large farm, that's when I would potentially a little bit concerned. If you're buying it from like a local farmer, probably who have like, I don't know, a couple of dozens of chickens, I think the risk is zero.
Yeah, no, she's on the Chesapeake, somewhere, small operation. But I've discovered duck eggs and they're wonderful. So, but I just I'd be concerned about the farmer.
So ducks supposed to be unaffected by the bird flu for now. I actually looked into this because the duck eggs are a really interesting alternative. Thanks, Cecilia, so much for bringing this up. I actually recommend everybody try duck eggs. They're not easy to find. There's not a lot of farms that are keeping ducks for eggs. They're quite tasty. They're a little bit bigger than the regular ones. In my opinion, they're tastier. Well, I don't know if they're tastier. They're just a little bit different. But, it's an interesting alternative. I would say don't worry about this issue for now. Again, I think the chances are the large farm eggs tend to be washed and also, or at least somehow cleaned. I don't know how they clean them. So it's very unlikely you're going to get anything from eggs at the moment. So I see the point from Al that there's no eggs. Yeah, I actually heard that people have been buying toilet paper like during COVID, and there's been on the news reports that there's shortage for common supplies in some places. I kind of find it funny. Maybe people are just buying it before the storm. That's my only guess, because people are preparing for next week. We may, I'm expecting DC is going to be no school Monday, Tuesday, and probably government will shut down on Monday. And then by Wednesday, we'll be back in, because the whole next week is going to be really cold. So whatever falls down in DC is going to stay down until the end of the week. But, of course, they're going to clean it up with the trucks and stuff and with the salt. So I don't really expect us having a long problem. So I don't know what's up with the people buying.
Let me
buying everything in Whole Foods.
Sorry, I want to make one comment about the DuPont Circle and the Foggy Bottom farmers markets. The farmers there have to wash their eggs before they bring them to the market.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that most of the eggs, if they're coming from a standardized farms into standardized stores, must be washed. Rona, can I do that next week? I'm not ready. I don't have any updates because I haven't looked into the norovirus.
Of course.
So that's a great one for next week. I agree. I love ostrich eggs, but they damn expensive. They're like $5 a piece. Although I think each egg is now like probably like a half a dozen of chicken eggs size-wise, right? So yeah, no, I like them. They're really good. They're like one egg makes an omelet for the whole family, pretty much. You find them, you can find them in Whole Foods. Sometimes. I mean, I've seen them in Whole Foods. I've seen them in, I think, Mom's Organic. Sometimes you can find them. So, I keep forgetting that eggs don't cost $2 anymore. That like a dozen of eggs is $4. I mean, I'm talking about like, free range, they're organic. You're not gonna find anything less than $4 anymore. You can find now some organic eggs for $7 a dozen. It's nuts. It's just, All right, let's not end there. Let's find ourselves comfortable seating. Let's do a elemental breath. We haven't done it in quite some time. So those of you who've been with us for a while know what it is, but I'll guide us through it. If you can go ahead and lay down if you prefer, that's fine. If you're sitting down, put your feet on the ground. Adjust your neck if you need to. Roll your shoulders up and down. And we're going to begin with nasal breathing. So we're going to inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose. So this is an earth breath. When we inhale, we concentrate on breathing through our feet, breathing up through the feet into the base of our spine, bringing the energy of the earth up into the base of the spine. And when you exhale, release any physical impurities. Those of you who just had a cold, it's really nice to concentrate on releasing any of the congestion or any of the phlegm. Of course, we're doing this with our thoughts. We're doing this energetically. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, exhaling down through the feet into the earth. Let's do 2 more breaths here. And we transition to the water breath. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Concentrate on purifying our fluids, blood, lymph, spinal fluid. Helps to imagine that you're in a body of water, maybe your own hot shower. Or if you're crazy like me and you went at 8 a.m. into the ocean in 26 degrees, you can imagine it's not comfortable, but it's still cleansing, different types of cleansing. It's very invigorating. Or maybe you just want to think of your favorite lake in the summer. And concentrate on sensing how fluid our body is. How much water is inside of each one of our cells. It's actually 60% by weight. We are 60% water. And so it's very important that we spend time allowing awareness of the fluidity of our bodies being there. And also, if you feel like you have certain rigidity around certain topics, maybe there's some thought processes that you're a bit too rigid about, this is a really good breath to bring to that. Remember, fluid, particularly water, will flow around any object. Apologies. Continuing with the water breath. This is also a downward element. So when we inhale, we bring the fluidity into our bodies, and then when we exhale, we let that flow through, generally through the, imagining through the abdomen. This is a belly breath. The water is centered in our belly. Of course, kidneys would be the center of the water processing in our bodies. Okay, let's do 2 more water breaths. Okay. So we're moving on to the heart breath. Inhaling through the mouth and exhaling through the nose. So of course, heart is associated, I'm sorry, it's a fire breath. So of course, fire breath is associated with our hearts. So you can concentrate in the middle of our chests. This is an upward element. Fire is an upward bringing energy-wise element. Historically, we think of a fire breath purifying our emotions, our heart, purifying anything, any frustrations, any sadness, any depression, anything that's sitting on our hearts. This is the practice to clear that. Inhaling the burning power of fire, and then exhaling, letting any of that negativity being released. Just think of it as being burned and released as the smoke and ashes. I think fire is also a very important element right now in the winter, where we have the least of it with the cold air around. So you may want to spend a bit more time. If you are doing this practice regularly, you can spend, according to the season, you can spend a little bit more or less time on a particular element based on how you feel. So notice that I spent a couple more minutes on the fire breath just because I feel like it's a good time for us to invigorate the warmth, to uplift our emotions. There's always a little bit of a winter blues. I think all of us susceptible to some degree to it. Okay, let's take 2 more fire breaths here. And let's move to the air. So the air is inhale and exhale through the mouth. And here the breath becomes a bit more gentle. I see some of you are yawning. That's wonderful. That's a good thing. You're doing the practice right. So allow for the sort of chaotic zigzag air movement to penetrate and to go into our body. In the winter, air is cold. So maybe your mind is drifting towards a bit more negative states because of that. So this is a good practice, good time to be more present to our thinking, to allow our thoughts to just be. Really important that we observe our mental plane without attaching ourselves to the drama of our minds. And trust me, all of our minds is a little bit of a drama queen, maybe one of ours. Some of us are more than others. I'm talking about myself. But, you know, it's a degree, not necessarily, but everybody has some tendency to that. So this is a really good practice to observe our thinking. Let our thoughts be, not attach our emotions and our presence to them. Just imagine that there are clouds in the sky kind of passing you by, come and go. That's the motion and notion of our minds, just kind of a transitory, very important, but we want to make sure that we pick the thoughts we like, that we want, and we let the others that are randomly showing out just be, just go. And you may want to check in with your forehead and with your face. Make sure your face feels more relaxed right now than before you started the practice. Maybe check in with your eyes. Check in with your lower jaw. If you need to, take a second and release the tension in any part of the face. And if you need an area to concentrate, for the air element, we concentrate in our foreheads. It's sort of a third eye, if you will. Some people also concentrate in the throat. If you prefer that, that's fine. And this element, this breath is pretty refined. So it's not very deep, it's slow, but it's gentle. It's not forced at all. And as I mentioned, there is no direction here. It's kind of a random movement, just like the air is. Air tends to move in a very unpredictable patterns. Doesn't necessarily go up and down. It just goes in whichever direction you pick. Okay, let's take 2 more breaths here. And we move to the ether breath. So we either inhale and exhale through the nose, or if you feel a little stuffed up, or if you just prefer, you can also inhale and exhale through the mouth and nose together. The breath is very gentle, very refined. And this is the element that collectively takes all elements together. And this is the element that helps us to connect to the greater, to the divine. You can literally imagine your own relationship with God, or if for you God is nature, or just a greater awareness of something more than us, then that's perfectly fine. It's a state of us being aware of sort of beyond our own bodies into either a collective consciousness, or again, if you subscribe to something more spiritual, then that would be a more relationship with that entity. In Sufism, we say that God is closer to us than our jugular vein. And so I like to remind myself when I'm doing ether breath that this particular breath really allows me to realize that we kind of live in one. that our lives are unsufferable to the rest of to everybody else, to the greater. And reminding of that periodically, I think, goes a long way. Two more ether breaths. Now, put your hands left over right or right over left, doesn't matter. Just put them right over your belly. And we'll take a couple of slow breaths into our bellies, letting the belly expand into the hands. And then releasing, relaxing. Soft belly breath. Holding this important energy center in our bellies. Closing this elemental breath practice. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025, that I'm sure is going to be just as crazy as 2024, maybe crazy year. We'll be all witnessing that. Next week, we have a wonderful guest, Chris Palmer. So I am going to hold off sharing the long video that we did with Chris. Of course, if you're a subscriber to our YouTube channel, then of course you can find that video already there. So if you're interested, go and check it out. Otherwise, I'll make sure I'll share it next week. And it's not an easy topic. It's a topic of achieving good death. It's a practical guide to end of life. Chris wrote a wonderful book about it. I highly recommend it. But we're not going to spoil anything until next week. I hope you all be back. Survive to next week. Stay warm. Practice elemental breath. More